We'll move on to reports. Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency's annual conference. Director Wasley and Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Chairman Rob. The Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency's annual conference was held in San Antonio the latter part of July. I guess some of the issues, certainly sage-grouse was an issue, lesser prairie chicken, a number of meetings. One of the common themes throughout the conference was states coordination, cooperation, Fish and Wildlife Service. So I think there was at least 6 different committee meetings that I counted where the issue of state and federal relationships was a significant part of the agenda. I think that'll continue to be the case. Certainly, partly due to sage-grouse, lesser prairie chicken, I guess listings in general. There were some interesting topics that came up that this commission has dealt with. One in particular was shed antler hunting. There was 2 different meetings that dealt with that in particular. There was a decision to have all the western states compile what they're currently doing, but it's an issue that's before a lot of western commissions right now. There's a lot of public concern over habitat degradation, animal welfare, with increased prices for shed antlers, and what that's doing to the animals and what it is doing to the habitat in some instances. So will likely be further conversation and kind of a coordinated effort amongst western states so that we don't create a scenario where if one state decides to regulate, it places a increased burden on the adjacent state. But there was some good discussion on that. I guess the one important thing was the theme of the conference. The theme of the conference was water for wildlife. And there were some very interesting speakers, from judges to lawyers to wildlife folks, talking about different states' approach to procure water for wildlife, minimum pool agreements, in-stream flows, and we actually had a directors panel. There was 4 directors. The directors from California, Texas, Idaho, and Nevada were on a panel. I kind of felt like I was on a Sesame Street skit on which one of these is not like the other ones. It was obvious that our issues with water were vastly different from Idaho, Texas, or California. It was really enlightening to hear what some of the other states are doing. But certainly our suite of challenges and problems, although not unique, were certainly extreme. So I guess I would ask Commissioner McNinch to share any experiences or thoughts he had coming from that conference.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. And the if we go different paths generally. I tend to sit in on the commissioners type meetings, and Tony's in on the directors. And I just want to say that you did an excellent job on that panel. It was very divergent from everybody else. The water issues in Nevada is very different, and Tony represented that very well. And I think that it prompted a lot of thought because people thought they had problems and some challenges. I think that they kind of walked out of there feeling a little better about some of their challenges. Some of it had to do with they have water, they just have trouble with, how they're going to divide it up. It's not so much a function of, if we have water. So anyway, but in the commissioners' meetings, I don't generally bring back very specific issues from individual states, but there were quite a few things this time that kind of stood out to me that I thought were little items of interest. So I'll throw a few of those out for you. There was quite a bit of talk on fair chase, especially the use of drones, and there's always you have other technology issues too, but everybody was very careful about defending the use of drones for hunting, but what they wanted to do was point out, industry especially, that that there are uses for this, and they can be specific to wildlife. And so they're working on developing some policies at a real high level. I think that and I wish I'd have taken a little better note, but there are efforts to put together guidance and policies and guidelines for the proper use of drones for wildlife management type purposes. And Tony, I don't know if you had any other comments on that, but I guess they're just trying to break down the concept that the use of these things is always bad. So they're trying to say, there might be applicability here. So there's things going on in that arena. Not so much on trail cams, but there were discussions. Arizona's created a fair chase committee, and their intent is to monitor emerging technologies and develop guiding principles. That's what they're doing in Arizona, and I know that every western state's dealing with it, and they're all in varying levels, like Tony was saying, of where they're at. So there's a lot of conversation going on, and there's a tremendous amount of concern. The wildlife agencies don't want to be perceived as supporting, or commissions rather, don't want to be seen as supporting unfair practices, but there are cases where it's not always so clear on what constitutes fair chase or not. So the bottom line is that it's definitely becoming more a topic of discussion, and I think that it's going to be, obviously we're going to be dealing with it a lot more. Also in Arizona, I thought it was an interesting thing and something that I think any agency should consider. They did a very thorough review of their licenses that they offer, and originally they had offered 46 licenses. They've whittled that down to 7, and what they've seen is an increase in their sales of their licenses. People are buying more. And they have their website does these little pop-ups so that when they purchase something, the little pop-up comes up and says, for this much more, you can buy this. And their sales have gone up pretty significantly. And I thought that was a kind of an interesting concept. And they said it's really simplified things. They've still got everything covered. And they've actually seen an increase in their license sales. Let's see here. Lesser prairie chicken was listed in May of 2014 as a threatened species. My opinion, without knowing all the details of it, or exactly where we're at with the sage-grouse at a real super detailed level, they definitely have what I would consider a more advanced plan. And the lesser prairie chicken still was listed as a threatened species. So I think that now the bird was listed because of its reduced numbers as opposed to threats to its habitat and stuff. It's a reduction in numbers, but the plan was thought to be an excellent plan and probably precluded a listing as endangered. So what I'm bringing up is that anything short of being real aggressive isn't gonna cut the mustard, I don't think. They have a very aggressive plan to set aside critical habitats. They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars doing that and developing agreements with landowners and safe harbor agreements, basically. And they've been very, very aggressive about it. And even that didn't preclude a listing. So, it really is a very serious situation for our sage-grouse, I think, is what I'm trying to point out. And here's this multi-state massive effort that went in, and it was barely enough to keep a bird off the endangered species list because the expectations are high, as it should be. So I'll share one more quick tidbit on something that happened in New Mexico. They had a DAG that had made an interpretation that anyone can walk up or down a drainage with or without water, even with private property on both sides. And that doesn't sound like that big a deal, but some of the issues that we're dealing with our trapping, just about anything. So it was a real interesting, I don't know what it means. I don't know, we didn't get into the context too much, but the bottom line is that they're saying that a drainage isn't considered private property in the extent that it constitutes a trespass. So that's not been tested in a court of law or anything, but that was an interpretation that their Deputy Attorney General had made at one of their meetings, and hopefully we don't get in a position where we got to ask Dave for an interpretation of that, but
Drainage with water?
with or without. So, just an interesting thing. And then two more quick things. There was a lot of talk on trapping, and Nevada's not the only place that's dealing with trapping issues. I think that most folks know that Arizona lost trapping on public lands a couple years ago. New Mexico is being challenged right now. They were in the process of considering a 24-hour from 48 trap check, and they now have an anti-trapping bill going through their legislature, and they're not convinced that they're not sure that they're going to be able to modify it. So they might be losing trapping in New Mexico. There was an initiative in Montana that did fail due to insufficient signatures, but the Montana commissioner was pretty concerned that it was just a trial run, and that the next time or two that it occurs, they're probably going to make a pretty good run at it. Idaho, they're in the process of reviewing their trapping regulations, and I know in Nevada we think we're very much like Idaho, which we're not in our attitudes towards wildlife, but they're in a position to where they're having to review all their trapping regulations, and it was all prompted by one trapper catching 2 domestics, and it prompted the review, and they have serious concerns with their trapping. And I think where it was all headed was commissioners from the other states were pretty open, and I shared some of the same thoughts, same concerns, that basically their trapping industries or interests, they feel that they're all basically saying, we're going to drive off the cliff right now. We're not coming to the table. We're not talking it out. They're looking for compromise, so this is more of a west-wide issue. If we think it's just here in Nevada, it's the whole conversation's occurring west-wide. And the one thing I found interesting is that most references, and Tony, I don't know, maybe I'm picking a really bad scab here, but the tone, I just didn't feel that a lot of there just didn't seem to be the support for trapping that there is hunting and fishing at this conference at this time. I mean, there was just, there's so much going on with it. I'm just kind of curious where the attitudes are with the Fish and Wildlife agencies and the commissioners in general. Generally it's been hunting, fishing, and trapping, and I just didn't get that feel that trapping was necessarily as included as it has been in the past. And I don't know why. Maybe I'm just too sensitive to it. Maybe I'm overly sensitive. I have no idea, but it just felt like there was a slight change in that arena. And then the last thing that I would say is that, and Tony, I would ask for your thoughts on this. In the commissioners' meetings, there was definitely a feel that a much greater recognition for the need to incorporate a broader foundation of financial support, or bringing the non-consumptives or the people that don't hunt and fish into the mold, into the fold for managing wildlife, funding wildlife, things of that nature. And it just seemed to be more prevalent this time than it has in the past. And I think that that's just a sign of, I think times are changing. I think that there's some acceptance of it that hasn't been there in the past, and a little more open discussion on it than there's been in the past. Those are some observations that I had, and I don't know, Tony, if you had anything different. So,
no, not necessarily, although I would say that there seems to be recognition that although we have a lot of PR right now, that whole funding mechanism doesn't have longevity to it, and that we're going to need to look at ways to broaden the funding base at some future point.
So the last two things, so I have two more, sorry. I don't generally do this, and is Perry still in the room? I don't know if she's still here. She left, all right, sorry. I did commit the department to, WAFWA is going to be, the conference is going to be in Nevada next year, 2015, so January of 2015. January 8th through the 11th in Vegas is the winter meeting, and July 16th through the 22nd for the summer meeting in Reno. And for the winter meeting, Tony, I apologize, but I committed staff to help with a couple of reports. One on wild horse issues, since Nevada is obviously ground zero for that in a lot of ways. Arizona offered to help. They typically do those things. And everybody was real interested in the bighorn sheep study that we talked about last time, and with especially the South Dakota project, but generally just the work that's going on with bighorn sheep in general. The commissioners, they just don't get it. They don't talk about it as much as we do. They don't have as many sheep, and so I kind of committed that we would do that. So if I overstep my bounds, let me know, and I'll let them know.
No, that's fine. Let us know if you need any help putting those together.
That's what I was afraid of.
Does anybody have any questions? Do you have anything to add, Director Wasley?
No, I guess not specific to the meeting, just generally. It is a great opportunity to be hosting next summer. It's about 300 people. It'll be in town. It'll be an opportunity for us to try to showcase some of our, I guess, landmarks and wildlife issues. And you know, I don't know how much participation states that host have been able to garner outside of their, you know, departments, but I would certainly encourage as many commissioners to attend as possible, and other folks as well. There's one-day passes, two-day passes. There's a whole host of meetings on everything, you know, from wildlife health issues, game. There's a mule deer working group, wild sheep working group, and these are the you know, foremost agency experts, you know, for the 17 western states and Canadian provinces. And so from a professional development point, I'm certainly going to try to get as much of our staff there as possible, and would encourage participation by as many commissioners as possible, and certainly general public that have an interest as well.
I've been lucky enough to attend a couple of winter meetings and a couple of summer meetings, and every time I came back, I would try to share the benefits of that. And I would make the statement that everybody should see it because it's a tremendous thing that happens. But on the flip side, if everybody went, you wouldn't get any continuity and build on those relationships, because I saw the relationships building in the time I was there, and that's important also. But with it being in Nevada next year, I hope there's not a single commissioner that doesn't make it for a couple of days. We have the winter meeting in Vegas. It's a smaller meeting, but there's high-level people from federal agencies there. There's different breakout sessions that would be of definite interest to any commissioner. So with the opportunity of being in Las Vegas and Reno next year, I hope that every commissioner does participate in that. And during the summer meeting, I'm hoping that we can get the bulk of the commission to attend at least 1 or 2 days of that time.
8th to the 11th of January, and that'll be at JW Marriott. 8 to 11 of 2015, yeah. January 2015, yeah, and that'll be at JW Marriott. And as Chairman Robb indicated, one of the values is the communication that you can have with high-level federal officials. So some of these meetings, you know, you may have Dan Ash, the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and be able to have a frank conversation about sage-grouse, and you know, make an argument as to, you know, why, you know, what we may be doing in certain areas, you know, will meet their needs, or heads of Forest Service, BLM, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Interior, and you're sitting down with these individuals one-on-one, and it's your opportunity to kind of advocate for your state, your issues, and then certainly, you know, regional representation for Fish and Wildlife Service. I know there's been an expressed desire by our staff to see a wildlife biologist at the Desert National Wildlife Refuge, and we weren't having a lot of success in lobbying for that locally, but having a sit down with the regional director, I said, this position is really important to us. And while we were sitting there, he picks his phone up and sends an email to his staff and says, they're on it. We'll have it, we'll have it filled, within a couple months. So it's just a great opportunity to lobby for our issues, our state. And until sitting on the outside for years, I didn't understand the value of it and actually questioned it at times because of the expense and the absence that previous directors incurred at these things. But knowing that, if you take advantage of the opportunity to have these conversations, you really can lobby for your interests in your state.
Thanks, Tony. I work and live right by that Marriott, so there's really no excuse for me not to. So if you want to register me, or maybe, if it's valuable to you, I'll certainly come over there and attend some of it as time permits during my workday and help with what you just said, if it's helpful to you. So, Karen, not too far away, are you? So we probably both want to.
And the important part is the breakout sessions during the day, you learn a lot. But I think Director Wasley and Commissioner McNinch would agree with me that just like any professional conference you go to, you learn during the breakout sessions, but you gather the relationships at the breakfast before the meeting starts. And they always have a hosted bar, different NGOs host hospitality suite. And you go to the breakout sessions, you find out who puts on the session, you find out who's there. And then a lot of times at those hospitality suites, like Tony said, there's high-ranking officials from the BLM or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and you can have very open discussions with them and not in a formal setting, and that's where a lot of stuff happens, and that's where you build your relationships and really accomplish as much at the bar after the meeting's over as you do during the day. And I would encourage anybody, if you're in Vegas and you go to the meeting, to actually stay a little longer and go to the hospitality suites and get to know these people. It really helps out.
Of course, you mean you're not drinking a lot when you're at that bar making all these high-level decisions, right, Jack?
Commissioner McNinch hasn't had a drink at one of those events, and I don't think he's ever missed a hospitality suite.
But kidding aside, I agree with you, because that's the same thing in law enforcement conventions. You get most of that accomplished after the formal meeting when you meet people one-on-one. So
yeah. As
Tony pointed out, it'd be good for a couple of our commissioners, and maybe Mike will still be on a commission then. We the rate we're going, we can support him down there.
Mike and I will find out if we're on the commission then about a week before, so it'll work out well. All right. Anybody else have anything? Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 9B, Overton Wildlife Management Area Conceptual Management Plan. Mike?
Thank you, Commissioners. For the record, Mike Zahradka, Wildlife Staff Specialist for the Department of Wildlife. I oversee the Wildlife Management Area System. With me today, too, is Mark Farman. He's a Wildlife Staff Specialist. The two of us compiled the information that was found in that draft Overton Conceptual Management Plan. We're here to provide an update on the draft plan that was released on May 20th. Public comments were to be received by July 1st. Those could be sent to us through email, letters to the NDOW headquarters in Reno, or they were also taken at the Clark CAB meeting down in Vegas. Overall, the draft CMP was well received with few comments submitted to us. I attended the June CAB meeting in Vegas just to listen to their comments that they were going to have that day, and to my surprise, there was very few comments. Quite a few of the different user groups did show up, and they seemed satisfied with the plan. In past meetings regarding the Overton Wildlife Area, these user groups seldom see eye to eye, and that leads to some heated battles. And I know Mr. Macbeth has been to many of those meetings and has saw quite a few of those. NDOW was aware of those issues and conflicts between those groups, and we incorporated these selected strategies into the draft CMP to eliminate, or at least minimize those kind of issues between those user groups. So that's kind of where we're at after the public comments were received. I'll let Mark go over a few of the comments that we got and how we're going to address how those will be put into the plan. So,
Thanks. Mark Farman, Staff Specialist with the Habitat Division. As Mike mentioned, we were really surprised. We only received 10 comment letters, which is, I guess, in a good way, or one way to look at it is that we're now reaping the benefits of the proactive input. We, working with the different groups proactively at the beginning. Paul Dixon helped with that with the Clark County CAB, Commissioner Macbeth. So I guess we must have done a decent job of addressing the various concerns as reflected in the small number of comments that we received. I just want to give you just a quick overview of what we did receive. There's kind of two different types, kind of broad policy comments. It's one batch. 5 out of the 10 letters were from pro-dog trainers that attached a petition from the Las Vegas Hunting Retriever Club, basically saying NDOW needs or should have dog training opportunities on non-hunt days during the waterfowl hunting season. And as you probably know, we did include that opportunity for the trainers first Saturday of each month and last Wednesday of each month. So we did add that. So in our minds, that broad intent of their petition was met. And we also hope to develop a multi-use pond that may have an area away from the other uses that could be used for dog training. Another kind of theme on broad comments was the National Park Service wants to be a little more involved in some of the detailed management that some of the approaches that we use at the wildlife management area, which is understandable because, as you probably know, we lease most of that land. Very little of the WMA is actually owned by the state of Nevada. It's land that the National Park Service owns that we lease, and we don't have a problem at all with involving them more. And a really good opportunity is to work more with the some of the non-consumptive users. The Red Rock Audubon Society wants us to meet with them. They, in addition to having good ideas on how we might be able to improve opportunities for bird watchers, they also mentioned there could be some funding opportunities. So I think there's a lot of promise in that direction where we can get together and come up with ideas. They mentioned some specific things, including opaque bird blinds, which I'm not really sure. It's a new term that I haven't come across yet, but we'll be learning more about opaque bird blinds and other opportunities for bird watchers. And then the other type of comment we received are real detailed ideas from users converting. They want to convert one more regular blind to a pit blind. There's questions about some of the plant species that are used both for wildlife and for crops. So there's some real nitty-gritty details that we're discussing internally with our WMA staff. So we're taking all that input and we're updating the draft to prepare the final. So there'll be edits made to both the background section. We do have some internal revisions from our Southern Nevada staff. They want to make a few corrections here and there on some of the background information. And we'll be updating a few of the management actions to prepare the final.
we're going to try to get a lot of this stuff done, hopefully end of September, early October. One last thing is any input that we can get from the commission. If you've all been supplied a copy of the draft plan, and if you've had a chance to review it, and if you have any comments or suggestions, we'd like to hear them now.
Commissioner Macbeth?
To say that that the conflict amongst the user groups was serious. I think the first meeting that Commissioner Young came to, or CAB meeting, was out in Overton, and I was wondering if we're going to have to call 911. I mean, that's how bad it was getting. And And so knowing where we started with this process and to see how it's ending up speaks to the success of how you guys went about doing it. And I commend you for really taking the time to get in there and understand what the problems were and coming up with the resolutions. I made it to that CAB meeting, the last one, June, late, and the discussion was already over, and I thought, wow, and then heard later on that it was, actually I think I may have caught the very tail end of it, but anyway, bottom line was is that I was really, really surprised to see that the different user groups who were at the meeting had pretty much nothing but good things to say about the plan. So I want to thank you guys because this is a facility that is very, very important to Southern Nevada because we just don't have the same resources down there as other parts of the state. And so for our sole Clark County facility, I think Ash Springs may be, Ash Meadows may be in Clark County. I can't remember, but anyway, I do appreciate everything you guys have done, and so thanks.
Any other commission comment? Commissioner Lane?
I want to say that we did go, the last CAB meeting was in Overton, and I was really amazed that there were very few people that spoke on this item. We had one issue on turkeys, and it wasn't, it wasn't that big a deal. So it really has come a long way, and I think everybody's very pleased with the fact that this has been presented, and I think it speaks to trying to resolve those issues among the user groups. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Drew?
Yeah, just a brief one. I didn't get a chance to read every page of every line of the draft plan when we got it last time, but I did go through it, and I was impressed just with the thoroughness and the formatting and everything else. I thought you guys did a really nice job. I've worked with a lot of planning documents, and that was one of the better ones I read. So just an appreciation to staff for all the work and effort that went into it.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work. We'll move on to 9C, Sage-grouse update, Secretary Wasley.
Thank you, Chairman. Just real quick, last year with the drought, we had a 30 to 40% decrease in LEC attendance. Despite continued drought this year, we saw LEC attendance rebound significantly. So we bounced back up. This year, we're only 5% below long-term average on our LEC attendance, and it's LEC attendance that we use to generate our population estimates. So we'll see what kind of recruitment we had when we have season here, put some wing barrels out and do a wing bee. We'll see what recruitment was like, but we know that we did increase our LEC attendance significantly from last year. Fish and Wildlife Service recently issued a letter, their data call. There's two parts to the data call that they're currently trying to collect. One is population status and trends. That information is due by the end of October. And the other is the conservation efforts database, where the service is trying to compile all the conservation efforts that have occurred to the benefit of sage-grouse, west-wide or range-wide, and that is to be compiled by December 31st, and that'll drive a lot of future processes. So again, there's a whole host of parallel processes occurring at the federal level, at state levels. It's a significant theme throughout Western Association, Fish and Wildlife Agency meetings, continued dialogue with our federal partners. Just speaking to the state planning process, we'll have a Sagebrush Ecosystem Council meeting next week with the expected finalization of the state plan. There's continuing dialogue on development of the conservation credit system. It's getting close to completion with mitigation ratios. The final product of the Coates map is anticipated to be delivered in January, and the Coates map is the habitat map that will describe the habitat suitability around the state and will inform a lot of future conservation efforts and activities. And so that's kind of a broad overview. If there's any questions specific to sage-grouse, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
Any questions? Okay, we'll move on to 9D, a report on U.S. Fish and Wildlife Division of Migratory Birds, Region 8, withdrawal from the western waterfowl-related activities.
So in Tonopah in June, the Commission was made aware that the Migratory Bird Office of the Fish and Wildlife Service in Region 8 in Sacramento had decided to withdraw from their participation with the Pacific Flyway Council. There was a pretty rigorous letter writing campaign. Ducks Unlimited, Pacific Flyway Council, and others wrote a letter trying to encourage their continued participation. And it was the Commission's desire to have some kind of a report or update on the participation of the Migratory Bird Office with Pacific Flyway functions. I have a letter that I believe is in your packet as support material under 9D from U.S. Department of Interior, Fish and Wildlife Service, Pacific Southwest region, addressed to Council Member Chair, the Pacific Flyway Council, in response to a letter the Pacific Flyway Council sent to the Migratory Bird Office encouraging continued participation. And basically, what that says is that the service, due to workload, basically permitting of renewable energy, is going to withdraw from, it's I guess portrayed as a temporary withdrawal from Pacific Flyway responsibilities, and then it says that they will expect these temporary measures are to last 4 to 6 months and will be reassessed on October 1st of 2014, and they'll return to a more traditional role then. So we're kind of waiting until October 1st for them to reassess and see if they're going to wade back into the Pacific Flyway functions. Fortunately, there are still some other regions that are part of the Pacific Flyway that participate, so there's still some Fish and Wildlife Service involvement in those processes. But I guess we won't know for sure what the Pacific Southwest region, Region 8 in Sacramento is going to do with the Pacific Flyway Council until they reassess their needs October 1st. So if there's any questions that I can try to answer, I believe Russell is here as well and might be able to answer them if I can't.
Any questions? Okay. We'll move on. 9E, private land, elk programs, and special incentive tags, elk arbitration issues. Ken Gray.
Good morning. It's never a good thing to be preceded and then followed by the director and when you're giving a presentation, but oh well. Basically, let's see here. Let me start this thing as a slideshow. There we go. All righty. Basically, I wanted to start out by talking about some problems that we've had or that we foresee having with the arbitration process associated with the elk incentive tag. But before that, I thought it'd be appropriate, since we really haven't had a lot of elk issues, and the Commission probably has not maybe been updated with our private lands programs for a while. So I just wanted to kind of quickly go over the private lands programs that we have associated with elk in the state before we get into some of the arbitration issues. So there's basically three things that we're going to look at. We're going to look at a quick overview of the two major private land programs. a summary of problems that we have encountered with the elk incentive arbitration process, and then provide some of our ideas of maybe how we can go forward and maybe alleviate some of the problems that we're seeing at some of these local levels. So the first program that we have is the Elk Damage Compensation Program, established in 1990, long-running program. This is the program that's associated with the $5 fee that's associated with every elk application. The $5 fee goes into a dedicated fund, and basically the money for this, the $5 fee, we fence private fields and stack yards with it. For areas where landowners have damage incurred on their crops, we'll pay for the loss of crops due to elk. And then we also, on occasion, will pay to repair a rangeland fence, or we'll even use some of that money for prevention, whether it's building jumps or reconstructing fence on the rangeland to try to prevent elk damage out there. Since 1992, we have paid almost $4.5 or $450,000 to private landowners, 112 claims paid. The average claim is about $4,000. The highest claim that we ever paid was around $30,000. So, it's a high number, but as long as it's run, it's really not all that significant in terms of how much we've actually had to pay out of this fund in actual money. Probably the most significant use of this money is preclusion. We've built 110,000 miles of elk fence at a cost of about $1.7 million. It's kind of interesting how it works. We'll go several years without building fences, and then it seems like we'll build 2 or 3 fences all at once, and we're kind of in the tail end of building quite a bit of fence the last couple of years. But elk fences are extremely effective. Once we build elk fences, it almost always eliminates the problem, especially around alfalfa. The arbitration process for the elk damage program is kind of interesting, and I think the key word in the NRS there is it specifically states that the formation of a local panel will be created to assess assess damage caused by elk, basically, and negotiate or determine disagreements between the department and the landowner. And then the Board of Wildlife Commission, NAC, goes on further by saying, we'll select a local panel. So it's really pretty, this specific arbitration to the damage is pretty specific that a local panel will decide disputes between the department and landowner. Fortunately, in this program, since 2006 was the first damage arbitration that we went to. Since that time, we've only done 2 additional, and both of these were really directly tied to the incentive tag arbitration program. In other words, the landowner basically said, well, I'm going to arbitration for elk incentive. I might as well take it to try to see if I get more from my damage agreement too. So it's been a pretty insignificant issue. Disputes between the department and landowners when it comes to elk damage payments specifically. And there's really 3 reasons why this happens. One is that we have decent criteria that we use for damage. We basically know how much an elk will eat a day. We know the cost of alfalfa. Usually in fields we have a lot better idea of how many elk are on it. So there really is, it's a lot more cut and dry than the elk incentive. The second reason why we don't have much is really there's almost a commission arbitration process in addition to the local. If there's a claim that's over $10,000, even if the arbitration panel says it's going to be over $10,000, it still has to come before you guys, for you guys really to make the final decision on whether or not that's going to be paid or not. So, there's not only do you have the local arbitration, but then you also have the commission arbitration, so to speak. And then the main reason why we don't have a lot of problems with this is that we do get really aggressive once we don't like to pay for elk damage, so we'll either fence fields, stack yards, or we'll initiate really intensive hunts to try to take care of a problem. And you guys have been involved in that part of it. The Steptoe Valley depredation hunts that you guys have approved for the last 2 years. We would have to build probably $1 million worth of fence to preclude elk in Steptoe Valley. Makes a lot more sense to us just to try to almost eliminate that elk herd. It's out in the flat country anyway. And so these depredation hunts that we've initiated seem to be extremely effective so far in terms of reducing these elk herds in these areas where we have high probability of private land elk damage. So really not that big of a problem. So then we get to the elk incentive tag program, established in 1997, kind of in conjunction with the statewide elk plan. And really the purpose of the elk incentive program is to promote cooperation between landowners that provide elk habitat that enhances, the elk resource. And unlike the deer and antelope tag program, where we count animals directly on cultivated irrigated fields, the elk incentive is based on percentage of use of private native meadows and rangeland. In other words, we calculate what percentage of the elk herd is using that portion of private land, and they pretty much get in that percentage of the elk tag, of the bull elk tags. So it's it's a little bit more, it's a lot more subjective, this program, than the deer and antelope compensation program or the elk damage program. This program is really designed to be a cooperative program where the landowner and NDOW work closely. 90% of the time we get counts from landowners, and so it is a very cooperative program. This kind of gives you an idea of what the elk incentive tag issued is. You can kind of see that certainly in the last 2 years it's taken a pretty big turn, and obviously that's basically following our elk populations and the number of tags that we're issuing. But to some extent, more and more people are signing up for the program also. So it is gaining in popularity and certainly providing a significant amount of tags out there. This just goes to show you some of the estimated values. $10,000 is just an estimate. Some of them go more, some of them go less. So over $7 million. If we were to include the 2014, it'd add another $1.2 million to the value of these elk tags. So it has provided a pretty significant amount of money to the private landowners to allow elk onto their property. When we look at the arbitration process for the elk incentive program, NRS is quite a bit different. It doesn't say that a local panel will be appointed. All it says is provide for an appointment of an arbitration panel to resolve disputes. And then when you look at NAC, the first segment of the NAC is the commission may select an arbitration panel from residents of the county in which the owner resides. So it almost looks like both the commission and the legislature maybe realize that this might be more of a contentious issue at the local level. NAC does go on in the next section to define, I guess, if there is going to be a local panel, then it kind of defines what the members will be, just like it does for the damage arbitration. Basically, our first elk incentive arbitration hearing was in White Pine County in 2010. Between 2010 and 2014, NDOW has been taken to arbitration over incentive tags 6 times, of which 4 have been by the same landowner. And all elk incentive arbitration has occurred in White Pine County. Elko County, where we probably have the majority of our landowners, we've yet to go to arbitration in that area. What the arbitration hearings over the past 5 years has done is it's really exposed some significant issues with the current process. There really is no structure or transparency associated with these arbitration panels. the arbitration meetings always turn into very confrontational environment. We as NDOW, being one of the contestants, I guess, in the process, we can't come in and provide a secretary or even bring in probably somebody to moderate these, because we've already pretty much been accused of running the show just by getting working with the game board to establish the part panel. The results come back to us. We then provide it to the landowner. So we've already been criticized in our limited role in the process anyway. And really the NAC, the only thing the NAC says is that the panel members will select a chairman, and that's about the only structure that it provides. The second issue that we see is it really puts the local citizens in a no-win situation when they're neighbor versus neighbor. And really at the last meeting, it was actually the livestock representative, the ranching representative looked at us and he said, we really are in a no-win situation as we were forced to call one of you a liar. And that really is pretty true, especially for the businessman and the livestock representative. They're in such a tough position. And then after the last meeting, all three members were really kind of, I won't say disgusted, but maybe I will say disgusted with the process that they all asked to get off the arbitration. They'd gone through two meetings and they thought their term was over. I guess I felt bad when I informed them that their appointment was for 2 years, and they actually have one more arbitration process to go through. So they're not quite done yet, but it kind of gives the flavor when all three of them want to get off of it, of the pressure that they're under. And it really isn't fair to the local field biologists to be subjected to the harsh ridicule that is associated with these closed processes. I sat here and watched some of the commission, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, and some of the ridicule that the director took and some of the commissioners took, and it's every bit as harsh in these meetings for the local biologists, some of the ridicule that they take. And then finally, even before some of this stuff came to light, the game board, the chairman of the CAB, had a real tough time finding members for this process. Last year it took over 2 months, 2.5 months to get somebody seated, get 3 members seated. By that time, we were already into July before we even were able to have an arbitration hearing, and it really does put the landowners in a tough position because they're not able to sell their tags, have buyers on the tags, and I really think that